There you are now. Welcome back to the garage to another HRE Uncut. Wow, has it been a month already since the last one? In this episode, we're going to do the usual, going through the garage and having a look at cars, how they're progressing and what we've done. But I'm also going to sprinkle some answers to some questions that have been coming through on the comment section of the different videos. So sort of a bit of Q&A and doing the uncut. The very first questions that are, or the very first question I want to answer is, it came in through a DM, but I said I'm going to actually answer it on video because I think it might be going through a few other people's head. So in the last episode, or in the last video should I say, we looked at putting the engine back into GT, and there was a hose that was bypassing while it was coming off the end of the cylinder head and back into the radiator, and I was explaining to you that that's a cooling aid for cars that aren't running an internal rad. And I just wanted to try and explain why it works so well. Look at this, we have a whiteboard. Oh, we're almost a professional channel now. So I think it's customary, isn't it, anytime you have a whiteboard on a YouTube channel, that the exponent of the YouTube channel has to say, well, I'm no artist, but here's a drawing. I literally am actually no artist, so bear with me on this. I've done a bit of a drawing, and this is the engine block here. This is kind of the idea of the engine block, cylinder 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is kind of like the cylinder head. This is, you know, an idea of the radiator, the bottom hose, the top hose, and, you know, the water pump. So in a normal cooling system, what happens is the water pump draws water from the bottom of the rad. It draws water in and pushes it through the engine block, where it permeates up through the cylinder head and then returns through the top hose. The reason why it does this is because hot water rises. So it always wants to rise away from cold water. That means if you've got water heating up in the engine block, it's naturally going to rise up through the top of the engine block, and the water pump has less work to do than drawing cool water from the bottom of the rad. You want to always be pushing cold water into the engine. You don't ever push warm water into the engine, because then it hasn't got as much of an ability to take heat out of your engine. On a Mini, what happens is, there's a couple of things that happen. One of the problems that happens with a Mini is the thermostat is on the same end as the inlet to the water pump. You can get what's called a recirc, or a bypassing effect. And what happens basically there is cold water comes into the water pump, it pushes up through the cylinder head and goes back out through the thermostat housing into the rad, rather than running down the block, coming up, running along the cylinder head and going out. You've heard of a thing called dry deck, and in a dry deck what they do, and Turbo Phil from TurboPhil or turbominis.com does a really good explanation on this notion of a dry deck. What a dry deck does is it brings a pipe across here and it seals off the cylinder head. So there's a seal here, so the water can't actually permeate up through the cylinder head. So what has to happen is the water has to run down the engine block, go through this pipe, run all the way along the cylinder head and into the rad. Now, my car is running to an FIA regulation, and this isn't allowed. You're not allowed to have this. It isn't in the regulations. So what we're doing is a sort of a crossover between dry deck and original heating. And what we've done is, you've seen in the engine build that I blocked up some of the waterways here on the cylinder head. That's to try and stop that circulation, or that bypass circulation, from happening, stop the water going up here. What instead happens then is the water is pushed down the block and comes up through the cylinder head and back into the engine. We further promote this flow of water at the back end of the engine where we want it by using the heater tap, which is here. And we use that by running that heater tap hose back in to the top of the rad. When we do that, we get hot water to come off the back of the cylinder head. That hot water then travels along that pipe and goes into the top of the rad. The only way for that water to get back into the engine is it must permeate down through the rad, get cooled and drawn back in again. Where people make a mistake is they see an outlet on the bottom hose, a sort of a barb that comes off it. That is the inlet, or the takeoff for the internal heater. The reason why it's plumbed like that in a car is because the hose doesn't go straight from the end of the cylinder head back into the water pump. It goes through another radiator, the internal radiator, to put heat into the car. In the race engine we don't have that, so we're not taking heat away. If we didn't put that pipe in there, but instead put it into that bottom hose, what would we be doing? We'd be taking warm water off the back of the cylinder head and we'd be putting it into the bottom rad hose. Is that water going to get cooled by the rad? No, remember, hot water rises. So where is it going to want to go? It's going to want to go back here into the engine block, not into the rad. If you don't have high flow of air through that radiator, what's going to happen is you're going to take hot water off the top of the cylinder head and push it into the engine block, where it's then going to get hotter. That same hotter water will come back out through, because it wants to rise, through that heater tap, get forced back down and into the engine where it'll get hotter. What will happen is you'll get this effect where your engine temperature will just suddenly start to rise and rise and rise and rise until such a time as it'll boil the water in the system and the car will overheat, or the engine will overheat. Now you're probably thinking, but I have this done and it doesn't happen. Well, if you're driving the car, a lot of air is being forced through the radiator, which will make all the water in the radiator cold. If all that water is cold, then it will have force to it and it will drive itself into the water pump to get the hot air or the hot water out of the top of the rad. So you'll really only notice this failing happening when the car is stationary, kind of ticking over for a while and not moving. But don't be confused and think that it isn't happening all the time. It is happening all the time. So if you want to delete your heater from the inside of your car, you've got one of two options. You either block this off completely, which isn't great because you're increasing temperature here in the end of the block, or secondly, you re-plumb it so that that water goes back into the top of the rad. Now I realise everyone doesn't have the ability to solder in pipes into the top of their rad. Some of you are probably running aluminium radiators which don't actually have, or you don't want to go get aluminium welding done, or you don't want to damage your nice radiator. So what I would recommend to those people is you should modify your top hose. You can buy kits now for not huge money where it'll put a barb into that top hose. It bores a hole in the hose and you shove it through. You've seen me doing it when we were doing the electric heater takeoff. If you look at that video, the electric heater takeoff, I'll put a link to it up there in the corner. You'll see that that had a sender going in through the top hose. You could just do the same thing with a hose barb. Put this pipe back into that hose barb and then the hot water will go back into the top of the block. Hopefully that cleared up the questions that were around sort of that bypass stuff I did, and make hopefully a little bit more sense. If you want more information on cooling system and ways to modify your cooling system to get better performance, leave a comment in the comment section below and I'll give you as much information as I can. I don't want to spend too long talking about it because I know people will probably get bored. So the first car we're going to look at, and you guys have seen this car before, it is this Clubman Estate. So the Clubman Estate is back in the shop and I'm going to show you exactly what we're doing on it. It did leave, I promise, I swear, it hasn't just been here all the time. It has gone back to the customer and he is thrilled with the car. He's really happy with all the modifications we made and how they're working. Unfortunately, we had one small problem, and that problem results or is seen here in this wheel, this big groove going through the wheel. So how did this groove get formed? What happened here? We've lowered the car and the new suspension setup is running the car low. That's exactly what the customer wants. He loves the stance of the car. But unfortunately, there's a problem with Minis, especially standard Minis, and that is that the rear wheel arch is designed in such a way that it curves down. I'm going to show you that here with the piece that I've cut out. So this is the inside of a Mini wheel arch. The rest of the wheel arch would be up here and coming across this way. So that's the shape of the wheel arch. So that's the outer lip that you'd see on the car, and then the wheel arch goes up like that and goes flat across the top here and down. The problem is here, look at that drop. That's almost a 2-inch drop of space that's getting lost. That's travel that the wheel could be going into but can't because of the way the wheel arch curves down. What we're doing for the customer is we are doing something called tubbing the rear wheel arches. Why are we tubbing the rear wheel arches? We're doing that to give space for the wheel to sit up into. What's happening at the moment is that when the customer is driving, his car sits like this. It has that nice clearance, it looks nice, the car sits nice and low, but as he hits a bump in the road, the wheel comes up into the arch and the screws that are holding on the wheel arch jam into the tyre and rub. What we're doing is we're tubbing it. Now, it's horrible to do this on a car that is so well painted like this and is such a lovely finish, but the customer is adamant he wants the car to sit at that height, and I agree with him. I think the car looks really brilliant looking with the stance it has, but unfortunately it has that problem. So what we're doing is we've cut out this piece of metal, which was the rear wheel arch, which was sitting like this. We have relieved the spot welds along here, took the inner wheel arch out, we cut it, this piece down, and then we rolled a bead up onto the bodywork. So we've actually rolled the rear quarter panel comes and we've rolled it up to form this bead along here. Then what we've done is we've put sheet metal, we've rolled the sheet metal in the roller across to get an arch form, and we've welded it up to the original arch, fully seam welded all the way along up to the original wheel arch, and then we've spot welded it all the way along on the outside like a normal body panel would be. Some people I've seen do this, and what they do is they put the sheet metal here, they cut the bodywork and they try and weld the arch along here. You'll lose all the shape in the quarter panel if you do that. The car won't have any shape in the quarter panel, it'll go flat here and it'll just look terrible. The only way to do this properly is to roll up a bead like that, roll up the arch like that. What's going to happen then is the plastic wheel arch is going to go over this. Obviously we're going to bodywork this and paint it. Then the wheel arch is going to go over, the original wheel arch is going to go over, and it's going to sit up like that. What has that done now? That's given us loads more clearance for the wheel to sit. The car doesn't have to stand any higher, it can have a lower centre of gravity, but we'll have all that room for the wheel arch now to move, or for the wheel to move inside the arch. We've got rid of all that. When we had the original in there, that wheel arch had to sit down here, which didn't give it any clearance at all and was causing that rubbing. So as I said, it's a job that I don't love doing. I had to think long and hard about this the other day before I even tackled it, because I hate working on a car that's painted already and doing such a major modification. But the customer was happy, he let me do the job, and I've protected the car. So we've protected all the glass, we've put all this masking tape on here to protect the paintwork against any overspray or any burn that might happen from the weld. And we've taken our time and we're working this arch in. We have to do the other side as well, and then the car will be ready to go back to the customer. And hopefully that's going to be it for his summertime he's going to enjoy. I'm going to show you something here now. I'm going to open the door because I know you are all really interested in the gear linkage. So I'm going to open that door and I'll come around the other side and have a look with you. Oh, that's locked. So I know a couple of you were interested about this gear linkage and how it fits in the car. So this is the Owens fabrication gear linkage setup. The only bit that I've actually made here was just this linkage here. Everything else is the Owens fabrication setup. And I have to say, I'm really impressed with it. It's lovely. It has a nice feel. It sits up really nice. It's in the right spot here for the steering wheel. It has a lovely positive gear change to it. It's not too tight. It does have a quick shift in it, but I think it's right on the money quick shift wise. It's not too tight, but it's not too loose either. It has a very positive feel. So I hope you guys get a good view of that and you can see what it's like in the car, because I know a few people were interested in that. What's my review on it? So far I haven't driven the car that much, but my take on it is it's really nice. I really like how it fits, I really like how it sits in the car, and I like how the position of it feels. Probably the only downside to it is it's tight here with the handbrake. When you're using the handbrake, you know, you have to be careful. You could get your thumb caught on the front edge of it, so that is something to consider if you're fitting it. I would have liked to have moved the linkage further back so that the gear lever would be more in line with the steering wheel, but you know, with the handbrake where it is, that becomes very, very difficult. So You could reposition the handbrake, but we were getting into some serious re-engineering of the whole cockpit at that stage. So we decided that this was probably the best compromise to get the gear linkage in this position where it's still very comfortable when you're sitting in the car. But yeah, you can still operate the handbrake. But it's something to consider if you're thinking of going this way. Questions have come up, I think it was more on Facebook than anywhere else, but about, do you need to completely solid mount the engine for this to work? No, this car doesn't have a solid mounted engine. It's a road car, the customer drives it every day. It's definitely not a solid mounted engine. We have really good quality polybush on the top, and we have 2 polybushed tension bars on the bottom pulling the gearbox back. Without those, I don't think this would work, but the engine in this barely moves. If it moves a very small amount, it's not a problem. There is movement in the gear linkage. The way I have the yokes set up here, there is a little bit of movement, so there isn't a problem. It hasn't jumped out of gear on me on any of the test driving, and the customer hasn't complained about it jumping out of gear. So for me, I don't think it has to be solid mounted, but it does need to be a stiff mounting. But otherwise, yeah, it works perfectly fine in a road car. Okay, a bit of work has to be done around the carpet down there to make it look nice, but not the end of the world. I think we'll move on. We have another project over your shoulder here. Maybe we shouldn't show this, but we'll give a little bit of a look at this. So this is another fabrication job that's going on at the moment, and it's a custom catch tank for another very close pal of mine. I just want to talk very quickly about aluminium fabrication. I'm not an aluminium fabricator. I do this for people who I know are going to appreciate the kind of work, and for people who want something very bespoke, something that isn't just available off the shelf. There's a ton of catch tanks that you can get for minis just straight off the shelf from people like MED or Swift Tune, or probably KAD have one as well. And you can just buy them off the shelf. That's not what this is. This is a very bespoke item that I'm going to do for a customer based on exactly his specifications. That is where my shop rules. That's the kind of work I love to do, where somebody has a very specific problem that they want sorted, and I can look after that for them. The thing about aluminium welding is that it takes me just as long to get my hand into the aluminium welding as it does to bloom and make the thing. So when you're getting your head into that game, you're going from doing body work or engine building to aluminium fabrication. You've got to get into that mindset. You've got to get your head into that game. So, you know, are you going to see a row of Kynes welds like you'd see on YouTube? No, but they're perfectly fine, and they'll do the job, you know, or like you'd see on those Instagram welding pages. I mean, it's not the best aluminium welding, but it is sealed, it's tidy, it's neat, and it's going to do that customer the world of good. You'll have to watch out on some of the other YouTube channels over the next couple of weeks or months to see who's getting this catch tank. Okay, I suppose we'll move on to the GT now. You have at this stage seen the video of the GT getting its engine fitted and coming up to, or coming to life. So I'm delighted to have the GT back in the shop here and to be starting to make ready for hopefully a race season coming up. The engine's in, which is great, and it's running like a little clock. I'm very happy with it, but there is other stuff to do to the GT. So over the next couple of weeks, you'll see some of that as we film what's going to happen. One of the major issues we have to sort out is bodywork related. So we have a dint here on the wing. Unfortunately, this dint happened here in the workshop when we were doing our renovations. There was a piece of steel bar lying up against the wall, and the bar fell over and it put that dint in the wing. It really annoyed me at the time, because I hate when things like that happen to what is a lovely clean car. But look, as my father always said, there's no point crying over spilt milk. We got away with it. We're really lucky. It didn't happen on the paintwork, it happened on the stripe. It turns out that that stripe is going to be replaced anyway, because when the stripe was put on originally, we weren't sure where to put it, and we put it where it is now, which is across the middle of the bonnet. It actually should be right up to the front edge of the bonnet. So the stripe has to get redone before the season anyway. So in one of the next episodes, I'm going to work on taking out the headlamp, taking off the grille, and massaging that dint out so that the body will be ready for to get the livery replaced and fixed here at the front. Other jobs that have to happen to the GT, it obviously needs a full nut and bolt check because it's been sitting up over 6 months, oh way more, a year. So it's going to need a full nut and bolt check from front to back to make sure everything is still tight and ready to go racing. We know we have a problem with the rear swing arm on the near side. I think we have a bent swing arm because we're at the maximum adjustment on the camber bracket, and it still isn't, we still can't get the setting we want. So I think that arm is going to come off and it's going to go into the mill machine. We're going to get it jigged up and see if it is bent. If it is bent, we have an arm to replace it with. Lucky enough, we have a near side arm in stock. So what we'll do is we'll do our bearing modification to that and we'll get that arm in there to replace it. Another job I want to do, and I'm going to do a video about this, is I want to show you how to true the rear brake drums. This is something I've been doing for a few years with a special jig made up with a rear hub, and it allows me to actually turn the brake drum on the lathe as if it was on the stub axle of the car. This is something I want to show you because you would not believe how far out some of these drums are, and you might think that makes no real difference, and on a road car it probably wouldn't, but when you want to get a really high hard brake pedal in a race car, truity in the braking system is critical. Your discs need to be completely true and your drums need to be completely true and central. So I'm going to show you that in another episode in the future about how we put those drums in the lathe and run them on the jig I have to allow us to turn them as if they were on the car and to get the drums completely true. After that, I think, I said a nut and bolt check needs to be done. And oh yeah, we have a dead shock on the offside front, so we need to get that shock off and we need to get it to the guys over in AVO to rebuild that shock for us because it's definitely not working. I think it might have got a bump in Ulton Park which damaged the valving inside. I think it might be damaged, but it's definitely not working anyway, so we need to get that shock off and back to those. Let's go through now into the engine shop and see what's going on in here. So I said I would sprinkle through the video some of these Q&As, and this is another question that I'm going to reply to here on the video as opposed to writing a big long message about it. So I've had a couple of people comment on the fire extinguisher oil pressurization system and want to know how it works or how did I come about this. So why did I pick a fire extinguisher first of all as the thing to modify to pressurize the oil system? Well, I was looking for a pressure vessel because I knew I needed to pressurize it, and I wanted something that I could control. So CO2 fire extinguishers are rated for over 200 bar. I think this one's rated for like, where is it here? It's written on it. Yeah, 250 bar. They're rated for 250 bar pressure. So this is a pressure vessel that I'm only going to put 10 or 15 bar pressure in. So that's brilliant. It's rated for that pressure. It has a control mechanism in the shape of this plunger that you press down. It's also rated for massively high pressure. So I know it can work really well. But the one reason, or the one thing that is really brilliant about CO2 fire extinguishers for making something like this is how they're constructed inside. So this is easy, lads, to get this apart. You need to clamp this in the vise and then you just use something like a big Stilson to open this. Obviously make sure the fire extinguisher is completely discharged. Never attempt to open one of these with a fire extinguisher charged. The pressure is immense and it would cause you serious injury. So make sure that fire extinguisher is fully discharged before you would do so. So opening the fire extinguisher, what you're going to find inside is the thing that makes this brilliant for operating as a pressurizing system. So obviously this is full of oil, and if you just put air in it with the tap up here, all it'll do is blow air into the system. But what it has is it has this spout which goes all the way down to the very bottom. So when you put air pressure in here, the oil is being forced from the bottom up that spout and out that lever. I had taken apart one of these years ago just to see how they worked, and I remembered that it had this, and I said to myself that would be the ideal thing for making a vessel to pressurize oil. I'm going to give you one tip though. There is a little fitting here. I'll just see if I can show you. Wait, move this O-ring. So these fire extinguishers have a little hole drilled in them. I don't know if you can see it. It's just there in the middle of the tread. So they have a little hole drilled in them, and that's to allow gas and liquid to go through the nozzle. You've got to block that little hole up if you're going to make one of these for yourself. I just used a little bit of bearing fit and a round bit of the end of a drill bit that fitted, and I just tapped it in there, and that just seals up that hole completely so that you won't get any air. If you don't block up that hole, you will get oil coming up, but air will mix through it and it'll put aerated oil into your system, which would be terrible. The only other thing then I did was I just drilled a hole through here that's really strong and tapped it. I think it's 7/16 BSP, I think is the thread. I'm not sure, but you know, find a tap that works with the end of an air fitting and thread it in there. The only other thing then I modified obviously was the end here by just putting a 1/2 inch BSP plumbing fitting on there, and then that gives you a 1/2 inch BSP outlet, and that's just an old oil cooler hose is all that is. That gives you an oil cooler fitting then, of course, which is what you want to allow yourself to connect onto the oil cooler. Obviously the end of your oil cooler that you're connecting onto is the feed side, so that you're filling your oil cooler, you're filling your oil filter, and then the oil galleries in the engine. Don't be inclined to connect onto the oil filter, because then you'll leave an empty oil cooler, and you want to get that oil cooler full as well as your filter, so that the minute the engine starts it has oil pressure throughout the engine. You don't get this big glug of air from the oil filter coming through the system. In here in the engine shop, we're busy. All the parts have arrived for the red roofed race car that we were working on. All of its engine bits, its new special HRE camshaft came in. That's been ground specially for me. It's a 310 XP Plus camshaft. That's arrived. New oil pump, new bearings, new water pump, cam followers, and the rest of the items are serviceable. The crankshaft is back from being ground. We got the crankshaft ground, balanced, and it luckily survived. So if you remember back to the engine strip down for this engine, it had run a bearing here on piston number 3. Yeah, it had run a bearing on 3, and we were worried that the crankshaft may not have survived. Thankfully, when I brought it to be ground, it didn't need to be ground, it just needed a polish, and the bearing is perfectly on size. So that was a bit of luck. Thankfully, we caught that early enough, and it's kept it where it's going. We are going to change the timing gear, and that's literally the only reason this engine hasn't gone back together. This engine came with this fixed timing gear setup, which you have to use offset keys to find your timing. I'm going to change this for a vernier adjustable duplex setup. So the same duplex as this, but with a vernier gear. It just makes setting up the timing easier, and we'll get the timing more accurate and precise straight off the bat. The cylinder head for that engine is coming together over here in the milling machine. So what's happening here at the minute is I'm setting up valve spring heights. So I did a video about doing this, setting up the valve spring seat heights, and I'm just measuring each one at the moment to see where it is, to see how much I need to take out of them to get them up to the right height. Once I have that done, I'll be able to do a final assembly on this cylinder head, which will involve, it just will need a coat of paint, it'll be completely thoroughly cleaned and washed, and then we'll be able to set up all the valve spring heights, get the valve springs in, and then that cylinder head will be ready to go on the engine. Hopefully the timing gear will have come at that stage, and that motor will be ready to go back together. And then we'll be working hell for leather on that race car to get that done. Because hopefully we're in a level 5 sort of restrictions here in Ireland at the minute, but we got an announcement from the government that it's looking like those restrictions are going to start to be ramping down over the next couple of months. So hopefully, fingers crossed, testing is going to be re-allowed, and we're going to get these race cars out and tested, and then we might even get to do a bit of motorsport this year, get to do a few car races, which would be great. So that's kind of it. That brings us up to date with where we are. Yes, there is loads of other projects happening, some of the ones you've already seen, and in the next video I will update that, give you some updates on that stuff. We have a podcast coming up with Classic Mini Breakdown. We're going to be recording that soon, so I'm going to keep you guys up to date on that podcast when that's going to come out. Obviously, I'm a working garage here, and my garage space is really critical for me, but luckily it is Easter time now and we have a couple of days off, so that's going to give us a really good opportunity to make loads of progress on Gretel. So the plan will be to build that jig we were talking about, so we're going to start filming that probably probably very early doors next week. So expect a big update to come on Gretel over the next couple of weeks. So progress is going to start there. Once we get Gretel into the jig, we'll be able to start doing loads of regular updates on Gretel and doing a bit of work, because we work on Gretel hopefully on the weekends when the shop isn't busy. But the problem is because we need to keep her rolling shell at the moment, we can't do any more to her, because we have to be able to move her out of the workshop on Sunday to allow customer cars come back in to get worked on. But if we get this jig built over the Easter break, Gretel will be up in the jig, and then she's rolling shell again. She can come in and out of the store shed, be brought into the workshop, worked on, and then brought back out again. So that's what's holding Gretel up at the moment. We were really keen. We haven't stalled that project or anything like that. We really do want to get going on her, but yeah, obviously working garage and customer cars take precedence. So that's where we are with that. After that, guys, I want to just take this moment to thank you all so very, very much. Today I woke up to open my phone to find that I now have 1,500 subscribers, and hopefully by the time you see this, it'll be 1,500 plus. It blows my mind. I can't believe that we are, what are we now, in April, and we've 1,500 subscribers. We started this channel back in, I think it was October. Yeah, around October time, October, November time. And I just cannot believe that we have 1,500 subscribers, and I won't even bore you with how many hours of view time is on the channel, but it's far outweighed any of my expectations. I know I ranted and raved on about this on my Thanks for 1,000 video, which isn't that long ago, but it needs to be said. There's a couple of things I want to say, and now is the time to say them. The comment section on this channel is just phenomenal. That's all I can say to you guys. It is phenomenal. You guys are interacting with me, and you are building a community which you are allowing me to take charge of, which I don't know to what honor I deserve this, but thank you so much. The comment section in the videos is brilliant. There's people weighing in from all over the world. They're telling stories of their experiences with minis. They're relaying the type of work I do to people who they've held in high esteem in their life. I can't tell you, lads, every time I look at my phone and see those comments come in, my eyes light up and it lifts my spirits on my heart. I love reading them and reading all the positivity. I cannot get over how much positivity is on there. The only one thing I'm going to say is, can we make sure that in the comment section we welcome new people in as well? I really want that to be the way this community goes. Let's build a community of like-minded mini enthusiasts, or engine enthusiasts, or car enthusiasts. If you're into engineering, if you're into working on cars, you know, working on engines, doing body work, then let's make this a community for people that are interested in that, and let's make it a welcoming one. I know there was a little bit of conflagration going on. I don't know if that's a word, but anyway, we're using it. There's a little bit of conflagration going on about dislikes on the channel. There was a couple of people. I know, Uncle Kevin, you have no time for these dislikes. But look, they don't cause me any grief whatsoever. They really don't. What I would say is comment. If you don't like something you see, comment. I won't be hurt or shocked by it. If you guys think I'm doing something wrong and you want to pull me up on it, do. I love to debate these things and to discuss the merit of whether doing something one way is the right way or the wrong way. The only way we learn, guys, is by questioning each other and trying to find the best solution. That's what we do together. We come up with the solution that's going to best fix the job. Otherwise, I suppose I just keep hammering on about it, but I'm really loving it, guys. I'm loving the community. I'm loving what we do and what we say and how we treat each other. After that, I suppose there's not much more for me to say other than, if you're new to the channel, you're picking up one of these videos, go have a look around. There's a load of content on the channel already, some really interesting stuff, and hopefully I've earned a subscription from you. If you like what you see, bang that subscribe. I'm going to try and keep you up to date with when the podcasts are coming out, this podcast that I'm going to be involved in. So if you're not subscribed, Get subscribed so that you're going to be updated by the community alert. I will post in the community section when that podcast is going to air. I'll talk to Peter from Classic Mini Breakdown and he'll let me know when that's going to happen. By the way, just giving Peter another plug here. Classic Mini Breakdown is his podcast, and it's really very, very good. He's been really nice to the channel, so hit him up with another little plug there. Other than that, thank you everybody who's subscribed. Thank you everybody who comments and who likes every video. I appreciate every single one of you, and I will see you guys hopefully on the next one.